Let me start with something personal. I am a philosopher and a researcher. I have been studying, reading, and writing for over 30 years, outside of universities, outside of institutions, working independently on my own terms. And then I started using artificial intelligence as a part of my work, as a research tool, as a thinking partner, as a way of pushing my ideas farther than I could push them alone. And some people did not like that. I was criticized. I was told that my work was less valid because of it, that I was somehow cheating, that real intellectual work means sitting alone with your thoughts, suffering through the process, and producing something entirely by your own unaided effort, or else it doesn't count. I want to talk about that criticism today because I think it reveals something important, not about AI, about power, about who gets to think and who gets to decide who is allowed to think seriously. Let's go back in time for a moment. Think about what it meant for most human history to be an educated person. It meant having access to books, which were expensive, rare, and largely available only to those who could afford them, or to those admitted into institutions controlled by the church, the aristocracy, or the state. It meant having the time to read and reflect, which meant in practice not having to spend your days in physical labor just to survive. It meant belonging to a network of other educated people, knowing the right scholars, attending the right universities, being admitted into the right circles. Knowledge was not simply something you acquired through intelligence and dedication. It was something you were given access to or denied access to based on your position in society. The printing press changed some of that. Public libraries changed some of that. The internet changed some of that. Every time a new tool appeared that made knowledge more accessible, there were people who resisted it, who said that it would lower standards, who worried that if everyone could read, if everyone could publish, if everyone could access information, then something precious would be lost. What they were really worried about, though they rarely said it so plainly, was that something exclusive would be lost, that the special status attached to being one of the few who knew things would be diluted. Artificial intelligence is the latest chapter in this story. Now, I want to introduce you to two thinkers whose ideas help explain why this matters so deeply. The first is Alfred Sohn-Rethel, a German philosopher who spent much of his life thinking about the relationship between mental work and manual work, between thinking and doing. He noticed something that seems obvious once you hear it, but that we rarely stop to examine. Under the economic system we live in, the person who plans and the person who executes are almost always different people. The manager thinks, the worker does. The engineer designs, the laborer builds. The professor publishes, the student absorbs. This separation is not natural. It is not inevitable. It is a historical arrangement, one that serves particular interests and that has very particular consequences. It means that the people who do most of the physical work in society are systematically excluded from the higher levels of intellectual life. And it means that intellectual work itself becomes a form of privilege, something that confers status, authority, and power precisely because it is not available to everyone. Sohn-Rethel called this the division between head and hand, and he argued that genuine human emancipation, the kind of a freedom that actually matters, requires overcoming it. It requires building a world in which the person who works with their hands is also a person who participates fully in the life of the mind, and in which the person who works with the mind does not do so from a position of comfortable separation from the realities of material life. The second thinker is John Hoffman, a political philosopher who extended these ideas and asked harder questions. What would it actually take to break this monopoly that a small class of people holds over knowledge and intellectual production? His answer was uncomfortable. It requires not just better technology and not just better intentions. It requires conscious political effort, a deliberate decision at the level of society to make the tools of serious thinking available to everyone, to refuse to allow a technocratic elite to seize those tools and use them to reinforce their own power. These two thinkers were writing decades ago, but they were, in a very real sense, writing about this moment. Because here is what artificial intelligence actually represents when you strip away the hype on one side and the fear on the other. It represents the first time in human history that the genuinely powerful tool for intellectual work, for research, for analysis, for writing, for making complex connections across vast bodies of knowledge is available to anyone with a basic internet connection, not just to those with university affiliations, not just to those who can afford expensive journals and databases, not just to those who were admitted into the right institutions at the right age and trained in the right methods, to anyone. Think about what that means for a moment. Think about all the people across history who had the intelligence, the curiosity, the drive to engage with the serious ideas, but who were never given the tools, who were born in the wrong place, or the wrong class, or the wrong moment, who spent their lives in work that consumed them, with no time left for the kind of sustained reflection that serious intellectual life requires, who had extraordinary things to contribute and were never given the conditions in which to contribute them. Artificial intelligence does not solve all that. The barriers are still enormous. Access is still unequal. The playing field is very far from level. But for the first time, the cognitive tools that used to require years of institutional training, vast library resources, and expensive networks of specialists, those tools are beginning to become available more broadly. And the people who criticize others for using them should ask themselves honestly. Whose interests does that criticism serve? Again, whose interests does that criticism serve? Now, I want to be very clear about something, because there is a genuine misunderstanding at the heart of this debate that I want to address directly. Using AI well is not easy. It is not a shortcut. It is not a way of avoiding thought. It is a way of intensifying it. When I use artificial intelligence in my philosophical work, I'm not pressing a button and publishing whatever comes out. I'm formulating precise questions that require genuine understanding of the subject matter. I am evaluating the outputs critically, identifying where they are wrong or incomplete or superficial. I am pushing back, refining, redirecting. I am integrating what emerges into a larger framework of argument and analysis that comes from 30 years of reading and thinking. I am, in short, thinking harder, not less hard, because I have a tool that challenges me, extends me, and forces me to be more precise about what I actually believe and why. This is what it means to be the master of a tool rather than its servant. The carpenter who uses a good saw is not less of a craftsman than one who cuts with a blunt knife. The architect who uses design software is not less of an architect than one who drafts by hand. The instrument does not replace the intelligence. It extends it. It makes possible things that would otherwise not be possible. What AI makes possible for someone in my position, an independent researcher without institutional resources, is a level and breadth of intellectual engagement that was simply not available before. I can explore connections across fields I haven't formally studied. I can test my arguments against a vast range of counterexamples. I can produce work at a standard that would previously have required an entire team of collaborators. And this, I would argue, is not the corruption of intellectual life, it is an expansion of it. There is a final point I want to make, and it is perhaps the most important one. We are living through a moment of extraordinary and genuine danger when it comes to artificial intelligence. The danger is real, and it deserves serious attention. There is a real possibility that these tools will be captured by those who already hold economic and political power, that they will be used to automate exploitation, to concentrate wealth even further, to build new forms of surveillance and control, to manufacture the appearance of democratizations while deepening actual inequality. That is not fantasy. That is a plausible and, in some respects, already unfolding future. And resisting it requires exactly the kind of conscious political engagement that John Hoffman was talking about, a deliberate, organized effort to ensure that the benefits of these technologies are distributed broadly, and that the people most affected by them have a genuine voice in how they develop. But here's the thing. That struggle, the struggle over who controls AI and in whose interest it operates, is not helped by telling working researchers independent scholars and thinkers outside elite institutions that they are cheating when they use the tools available to them. It is not helped by defending a status quo in which intellectual production is concentrated in a small number of privileged hands. It is helped by exactly the opposite, by insisting that these tools belong to everyone, that the power to think seriously, to research rigorously, to contribute to the life of ideas, that power is not the exclusive property of the credentialed few. That a philosopher working independently, without institutional support, using every available tool to push their thinking as far as it will go, is doing something legitimate, something valuable, something that the tradition of critical thought, at its best, has always encouraged. The critics will continue to criticize. That is fine. Criticism is part of the work. But the next time someone tells you that using artificial intelligence in your intellectual work makes that work less valid, ask them a simple question. Ask them who benefits from that belief. Ask them who has always benefited from the idea that serious thinking is something only certain kinds of people in certain kinds of institutions with certain kinds of credentials are qualified to do. And then keep thinking, keep working, keep using every tool at your disposal. Because that is what intellectual freedom has always meant. Not the freedom to think within limits set by those who got there first, but the freedom to think beyond them. Thank you.